Operation Overlord, the Airborne Troops, a four-part series about the paratroopers and glider soldiers of the United States, Canada, Britain, and France on June 6, 1944. Episode 3, Missions and Strategies, the Night of the Parachutes. It is just past midnight on June 6, 1944. Above Normandy, thousands of parachutes open like white flowers against a black sky. Some soldiers land exactly where they are supposed to. Others land in swamps, on church steeples, in foreign villages, miles away from their objective. One man lands in a chicken coop, another in the middle of a German barracks, a third in the icy water of the Merville River, where the weight of his gear pulls him under before he can release his harness. What matters now is not the plan. What matters is what these men make of it in the next few hours. The airborne operation on D-Day was one of the riskiest actions of the entire war. More than 23,000 men from 4 nations jumped or landed in gliders behind German lines. Their assignments were clearly divided: secure bridges, take out artillery, block roads, cut telephone lines, confuse the enemy before the main forces hit the beaches. The planners knew it would be costly. Some estimates predicted that up to 70% of the airborne soldiers would not return. General Eisenhower himself wept when he visited the men of the 101st before they boarded their planes. He believed he was sending many of them to their deaths. 4 nations, 4 missions, each with its own meaning, and each that would unfold in ways no one in the briefing rooms could have predicted. Part 1, the Americans, Sainte-Mère-Église, and the roads behind Utah Beach. The 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions had a clear task. They were to secure the roads that led inland from Utah Beach. Without these roads, the troops on the beach couldn't move forward. Behind the beach lay flooded fields, deliberately put underwater by the Germans. The only way through ran along narrow causeways, and whoever controlled the causeways controlled the entire invasion sector. The men of the 82nd were also supposed to take the town of Sainte-Mère-Église, a small village through which an important road passed. Whoever controlled Sainte-Mère-Église controlled the route into the northern Cotentin Peninsula. The town also had a German garrison that needed to be eliminated before reinforcements could arrive. But the reality looked very different from the plan. Because of flak fire and clouds, the C-47 pilots broke formation to avoid being shot down. The planes scattered their men across a huge area, sometimes 30 miles from the intended drop zones. Many landed far from their units. Some fell into flooded fields where the weight of their gear pulled them under the water before they could free themselves. One of the most famous moments came from a paratrooper named John Steele of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment. His parachute caught on the church steeple of Sainte-Mère-Église, leaving him hanging right above a square that was already lit up by a burning building. German soldiers were firing in all directions. Steele played dead for hours, listening to the sounds of his comrades fighting and dying below him. He was eventually captured, escaped a few days later, and rejoined his unit. That scene would later become one of the best-known stories of D-Day, immortalized in films and even in a small dummy that still hangs from the church today. Despite the chaos, something remarkable happened across the entire drop zone. Small groups from different units found each other, often without officers, and began to fight on their own initiative. A sergeant from the 101st might find himself leading men from the 82nd whom he had never met. A private might suddenly find that he was the senior soldier in his group simply because everyone above him was dead, captured, or missing. These mixed groups blocked roads, cut telephone lines, and attacked German positions wherever they found them. This improvisation saved the plan. By morning, key crossroads were in American hands, and the Germans had no clear picture of what was happening. In Sainte-Mère-Église, a group under Lieutenant Colonel Edward Krauss secured the town in the first hours of the morning. They raised an American flag over the town hall, the same flag that had flown over Naples when the regiment took that city months before. It was the first French town to be liberated. Part 2, the British, Pegasus Bridge, and the guns of Merville. The British 6th Airborne Division had 2 tasks so difficult that many thought they were impossible. The first was to capture 2 bridges over the Caen Canal and the River Orne before the Germans could blow them up. These bridges mattered because the Germans could move tanks across them toward the coast. If those tanks reached Sword Beach, the entire British landing could collapse. The operation began with something that had never been done quite like this before. 6 gliders towed by bombers from southern England were released at 6,000 feet in the middle of the night. The glider pilots had memorized the terrain from aerial photos and small clay models. They had to find 2 specific fields, no bigger than a few football pitches, in complete darkness. The first 3 gliders landed within yards of their targets. One stopped just feet from the bridge over the canal. Major John Howard and his men of the Ox and Bucks Light Infantry stormed out before the Germans even understood what was happening. Within 10 minutes, both bridges were in British hands. The bridge over the canal was later named after the winged horse on the division's emblem, Pegasus Bridge. Howard's men then held the bridges for hours, fighting off German counterattacks until commandos under Lord Lovett arrived from the beach to relieve them. Lovett famously brought his personal piper, Bill Millen, who played the bagpipes as they marched up to the bridge, despite the bullets flying overhead. The second mission was even harder. A German artillery battery at Merville had to be taken out. These guns were believed to be heavy enough to shell the soldiers landing at Sword Beach. The men of the 9th Parachute Battalion, under Lieutenant Colonel Terence Otway, were tasked with storming the position. But almost everything went wrong. The men were scattered widely on the drop. Out of 600 planned soldiers, only about 150 reached the assembly point. The special equipment was lost in containers that fell into swamps and fields the troopers couldn't reach. No mortars, no mine detectors, no ladders, no engineers. Even the medical supplies were gone. Otway decided to attack anyway. He had a deadline. If the battery wasn't silent by a certain hour, a Royal Navy cruiser would open fire on it, and his men along with it. With less than a quarter of his men and almost no equipment, the British stormed the gun battery in a direct assault. They cut through barbed wire by hand. They crossed minefields by feel. They took the position in a brutal close-quarters fight. The cost was high. Roughly half of his attacking force fell in the assault, but the beach was safe. Part 3, the Canadians, the bridge at Varaville and the eastern flank. The 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion was part of the British 6th Airborne Division and had one of the toughest jobs, securing the eastern flank of the landing. Their mission covered several objectives. They were to destroy bridges at Varaville and Robholm, take out a German radio station and a fortified position at Varaville, hold the village of Le Mesnil, a small crossroads that sat on high ground above the surrounding countryside. Here too, the drop was chaotic. Many Canadians landed in swamps along the river dives, which the Germans had flooded to slow down any airborne attack. Some drowned under the weight of their gear before they could cut themselves free. Others spent the night wading through chest-deep water, holding their weapons above their heads, trying to find solid ground. Once again, small groups had to act on their own. Captain John Hanson, badly wounded in the leg, refused to be evacuated and continued to lead his men in the attack on Varaville. Major Murray McLeod was killed leading the assault on the fortified position. His men finished the job without him. One story that is rarely told is that of the bridge at Robholm. A handful of Canadians under Lieutenant Norman Toslin reached the bridge without explosives. They waited for hours, holding the position against passing German patrols, until more men with demolition charges finally arrived. Only then could they complete their task. The bridge went up in flames just as a German truck convoy approached on the other side. Le Mesnil became the Canadians' main defensive line. For weeks, they held there against German counterattacks. They dug in along the road, built up sandbag positions, set up Bren guns at the crossroads. German mortars rained down on them daily. Snipers picked off men one by one, but the line held. It wasn't a famous place. There are no movies about Le Mesnil, but anyone who had given it up would have put the entire eastern flank at risk. Part 4, the French, Operation Dingson and Samwest in Brittany. The French SAS paratroopers did not jump into Normandy itself. They jumped farther west into Brittany. Their task was to hold back German reinforcements heading toward Normandy, especially the dangerous 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, which was stationed in southern France and could move north within days. 2 operations were launched, Dingson in the south of Brittany, Samwest in the north. Small groups of French paratroopers landed in the early hours of June 6th, met up with the local resistance, and immediately began blowing up rails, cutting telephone lines, and ambushing German convoys. The leader of Dingson was Commandant Pierre Bourgoin, a man who had lost an arm in earlier fighting but refused to be sent home. He jumped one-armed into Brittany and set up a base camp at Saint-Marcel, where hundreds of resistance fighters joined the small SAS group. Within days, the base had grown into a small army. This was not open battle. This was war from the shadows. The French knew the land. They knew the language. They knew the people. Within a few days, they had tied down thousands of German soldiers desperately needed at the front. The Das Reich Division, which should have reached Normandy in 3 days, took more than 2 weeks to arrive. Along the way, it committed terrible atrocities against French civilians, including the massacre at Oradour-sur-Glane. But it arrived too late to change the outcome of the invasion. There were serious setbacks, too. The Samwest camp was discovered and attacked on June 12th. Men were killed. Others had to flee into the forest. The Saint-Marcel base of Dingson was attacked a week later by a much larger German force. The French and the resistance fought all day, then disappeared into the countryside under cover of night. But the real effect of these operations was not in single engagements. It was in the time the Germans lost. Every hour they spent chasing French paratroopers through Brittany was an hour they couldn't spend reinforcing Normandy. 4 nations, 4 missions, 1 night. Much went wrong. Men landed in the wrong places, equipment was lost, whole units were cut off from their comrades for hours. Officers died and sergeants took command. Sergeants died and privates took command. And yet they completed their assignments, not because the plan was perfect, because the men helped themselves, because they improvised, because they kept going when everything was against them. But what did these missions really achieve in the end? How did they contribute to the success of the whole invasion? And how did their work shape the rest of the war? That's the focus of the final episode.